year or so how many major Wall Street firms have bit the dust. These guys are not infallible. They've made a bet here that is not borders on, is a reckless bet. It's going to be real interesting to see how it turns out.
I just want to highlight, Ted, very quickly. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but Silver Wheaton had a major announcement. They're the largest silver streaming company in the world. The news came out with Barrick. I found it interesting that Barrick did not have their financing announced until the closing of our consummation, I should say, of a deal with Silver Wheaton. It also appeared that Silver Wheaton had extremely favorable terms with regards to that transaction. Barrick's stock reacted by going down. Silver Wheaton went up. And do you have any comments on that?
Well, the only thing I'll say, I'll limit my comments to Barrick, and I did write an article for subscribers this week about this particular transaction, not the Wheaton transaction, but the closing of the gold hedge transaction with Barrick, and I'll put it out in the public domain next week. But the one thing I'll say about Barrick is that I think it's a great operational company. They know how to take metal out of the ground very efficiently. Had they just stuck to that, I think everybody would have been better off, particularly shareholders. These guys should stick to mining and stay away from these macro financial bets, whether it's a short on gold starting 10 years ago or giving away basically their future silver production. If this Barrick management would just stick to their knitting and stick to mining and acquisitions and just the business that shareholders want them to be in, I think the whole world would be, anybody around Barrick would be much better off. These guys would just stick to their knitting.
Well, also, I would point out that people were warning Barrick not to engage in these forward-selling contracts that have ended so disastrously. Nearly a $6 billion charge will be recorded this quarter. And, of course, they had to have the financing and the news with Silver Wheaton to sort of raise some money to begin to cover some of those massive losses that have occurred. They were warned not to engage in that, and yet they continue to do that. There was the GATA lawsuit with Reg Howe and the other firm, and then, of course, that was settled out of court, so nobody really knows what in the heck took place there in terms of how that was done, or was that orchestrated with the government, or wasn't it? We don't know. We'll probably never know. But anyway, Ted, were you one of the people warning them not to engage in this?
Well, Eric, as far as I remember, I was probably the first one, but that's neither here nor there. It's been a disaster, this whole thing for Barrick. My estimate in the article I put out is that from day one, they've probably lost close to $10 billion messing around with these gold hedges. They should have never gotten into it in the first place. But what can you do? They just never would listen to anybody.
Ted, I want to go just a little bit long with you today, just to point something out for the silver faithful and for the listeners out there, both on gold and silver, because so goes silver to a degree. I think so goes gold. They tend to help each other along, right? But you've talked about this in the past. You've written you've chronicled this whole thing for so long on silver. But if you have, Ted, 1 billion ounces of silver above ground, as you've pointed out in the past, and the price is, say, roughly $17, very little of that 1 billion ounces is actually for sale. But even if it was all for sale, that's only $17 billion. And as these oceans of paper money begin to panic eventually, as these currencies get worse and worse and the inflation accelerates, and it will globally, and we can have pockets of deflation, but I think that we will ultimately have inflation. As you see that, the silver market can become extraordinarily manic, could it not? Just because of the money that would flow in and the inability to procure or get product anywhere?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the unspoken truth in silver, just how little there is of it. You say I always ascribe to 1 billion ounces and above ground, bullion equivalent, 1,000-ounce bars and equivalent. But as you say, it's if you look at the real availability, somebody trying to come along and buy 100 million ounces of real silver, as took place 30 years ago with Bunker Hunt and his associates, as took place around 10 or 11 years ago with Warren Buffett. I think somebody coming in, and it's going to happen someday, trying to amass that quantity, which would only be at current prices less than $2 billion, I tell you, it would just set that market on fire. There's just no way somebody could pick up that amount of silver, 100 million ounces, without blowing the roof off it.
Ted, you also have a newsletter which has taken off incredibly well, and you give your subscribers crucial updates during the week.
Yeah, no, it's been very well received. I'm real happy with it. I should have done it a long time ago. Everybody seems to be tickle pink with it, and I get to give a little bit more information on a little bit more frequently than I had in the past. So, knock on wood, so far it's great. And anybody wants the information, I understand you have the information right on your site.
When they go to your informational page on your interview, it's right there to the right, and it has information where they can click on and get more information and get signed up. So thank you very much, Ted, for joining us.
Great. You have a nice weekend, Eric. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us at KingWorldNews.com. Remember to tune in next week, as Silver Wheaton just had a major news announcement this week with Barrick Gold's. The CEO, Peter Barnes, will be here to talk about that news. Part 2 of James Dines will be pre-released on Monday. We also have Bill Fleckenstein of Fleckenstein Capital, as well as Rand Paul, future Senator of Kentucky, son of Congressman Ron Paul. Also remember to go to our Gold Plus page for exclusive weekly interviews with Ted Butler and Gata. Also in the business section, we have Barry Ritholtz, author of Bailout Nation.